Right. So, good morning, everybody. I hope I'm audible to you. Right. So, for today, let's have a small discussion on some good number of applications of mathematics. Right. See, we'll see mathematics in different situations. We'll see different situations around us, and in many of those situations, we can find applications of mathematics. Okay. Let me just begin directly without wasting any of our time. Before taking a particular application, let me just take few concepts of mathematics in which you will find applications. Okay, so the first topic which I'm considering here is system of equations. Right, so when you are given a particular algebraic system of equations, what do you mean by algebraic system of equations? Look at this. What do you mean by equation first? If you know uh, what do you mean by equation, then you can understand the other issues quite easily. See, for example, if you are given something like this, x plus y is equals to some 3. It's an equation which involves two variables. Yes. Now see, if you are given two equations of this kind, then we call this group of equations as a system. Right. Now see, we are particularly taking linear system of equations. What do you mean by linear system? When the degree of these unknowns is 1, you are calling them as linear system. Now see, when you are given this kind of system of equations, how to find out their solution? Okay, if you are given a system of equations of this kind, it's actually, you can see this one. This is a system of two equations in two unknowns. Now, when you are given a system of two equations in two unknowns, how to find out the solution of this system? Then what do you mean by solution? Solution means finding the values of x and y. Finding the values of x and y, which satisfies this system simultaneously. I mean, this combination satisfies all the equations simultaneously. Now see, this is what we do normally when you are given a system of equations. In fact, for example, if you are given this system of equation, let us say, right, you are given a system of three equations. You are given a system of three equations in three unknowns, right? If you just recall how to solve this particular system, look at this. Whenever you are given a system of equations like this, we'll first try to write its corresponding matrix form. Right, matrix form in the sense, we'll just try to write it like Ax is equals to B. And what is this A here? A is the coefficient matrix, isn't it? It is the coefficient matrix. Coefficients, you will take the coefficients of all unknowns from each equation. If you look at the first equation, see, it is x plus y plus z is x plus y minus z is equals to 9. Now from that equation, if you take all the coefficients, the coefficient of x is 1. Then coefficient of y is 1. Then coefficient of z is minus 1. Then in the second equation, look at it. The coefficient of x is actually 0. Right? There is no term with x. And then if you take coefficient of y, it is 8. Then similarly, if you take coefficient of z, it is 6. Then similarly, from third equation, you can write these as the coefficients, and thereby see, this is the coefficient matrix. And what is matrix X here? X is the set of all what you call unknowns, X, Y, Z. And this is equal to, you have some right hand side matrix. Look at it. The right hand side values here, they are 9, minus 6, and 40. Now, after writing it this way, you have few different methods to solve this system of equations, right? Remember, if you take this as matrix A, you can use either Cramer's rule, or you can use what you call matrix inversion method, or most popular Gauss-Jordan method. You can use either of these methods whenever determinant of A is not equals to 0, right? Corresponding to this, whenever determinant of A is not equals to 0, you can use either of these methods. Yes or no? Right? Now see, there are different difficulties. I'm not getting into all those difficulties. We are going to address all those difficulties while we discuss a little advanced topic in algebraic system of equations. Right? It's a part of our syllabus actually. I'm not getting into the syllabus as of now. But see, the idea is, whenever you are given a system of equations like this, you can first write its matrix form, and then using either of these methods, which you know already, you can find out the solution. You can find out a set of values x, y, and z. Then after finding these values, you can do whatever you want to do. But see, now let me take different situations from which you can find out. I mean, you will get a system of equations and thereby you can find out its solution. Okay, so let me just proceed to one first application like this. Let me take an electrical network, right? I hope you're all familiar with these Kirchhoff's laws. I think you have studied these in intermediate, especially in physics. Now, let me just take one application from physics like this. Probably the students of electronics and electrical engineering, right? Somehow you will be aware of this, right? Of course, you are going to study little more advanced concepts in this in coming semesters. Look at this particular network, right? I hope you're aware of this. If you look at these symbols, in the network, you can understand, they represent resistance, right? They are all resistors. Now see, it is a closed circuit where you have two different electric sources and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different resistors. If you like this is a resistor of resistance 20 ohms and this is a resistor of resistance 10 ohms and there is one more 10 ohms resistor and there is one more, 15 ohm resistor, right? Now see, there are two electric sources and you can see there are electric, there are passage of current at different locations of this circuit. You can see I1, I2, I3. Now the question is, looking at this circuit, can we calculate what are the currents involved in this closed circuit? Right? At different locations of this circuit, you can find different passages of currents. Can we find out these currents? That's a question. Now see, whenever we get some electrical circuits, we need to immediately recall two Kirchhoff's laws, Kirchhoff's voltage law as well as Kirchhoff's current law, right? Probably you remember this, but anyway, I've just quoted them here. If you take Kirchhoff's current law, it says at any point in the circuit, the sum of inflowing currents at any particular point, the sum of currents moving towards that is exactly equal to the sum of currents moving out of it. And similarly, if you recall Kirchhoff's voltage law, it says in any closed circuit, in any closed loop, the sum of voltage drops is equal to the impressed electromotive force. Perhaps if there is no electromotive force in the circuit, that net voltage drop will be equal to 0, isn't it? Now, keeping these laws in view, I'm just trying to find out the currents at different locations in the circuit. Right, see, I'm just trying to observe by taking this node P, right? There are two nodes which you can see here, node P to Q. Now see, if you take the current at node P, all right, see, I'm just trying to use Kirchhoff's current law here. At node P, see what are the currents moving towards P. See, here is I1 is moving towards P. So I can take current I, right? I'm just trying to use Kirchhoff's current law. What it says, the currents flowing towards that is equals to the current flowing out of it. So if I stand and observe the currents at P, now at P, I1 is moving towards this and anything else you see, I3 is also moving towards this, right? Across this resistor, I3 is also moving towards P. So I can add I3 here and now this is equals to, what is the current moving out of this? See, from P, I2 is moving out of this. So this sum is equals to I2. So from this, you can write one equation like I1 minus I2 plus I3 is equals to 0. I got one linear equation from this particular idea, right? Remember, I1, I2, I3, they are actually unknowns in this circuit. We are just trying to find out them. Now let me just look at the other node Q. If you look at Q, see what currents are moving in. See, only I2 is moving towards Q. So that I'll just take I2 is equals to, see what are the other currents moving out of this. Both I1 as well as I3, both are moving out of Q here. So that this is equals to I1. In fact, I1 plus I3. You see, you are getting the same equation. No need to worry. Let me write this again. I1 minus I2 plus I3 is equals to 0. Right? I'm just observing all different locations. Now see, this is what you can do with Kirchhoff's current law. Now let me just look at Kirchhoff's voltage law. It says in any closed loop, if you look at the circuit carefully, there are two different closed loops, right? One is a left loop and the other one is a right loop. Now, if you look at this left loop, left loop is this, isn't it? Left loop is this. Now, in the left loop, see what are the net voltage drops. Okay, how to find out the net voltage drops? Because see, this circuit has exactly resistors only. When the circuit has only resistors, the net voltage drop is equals to IR. Right? I into R is the net voltage drop across a resistor. Now look at this. The current passing through this circuit, you see this resistor is I2 and the resistance of this resistor is 10 ohm. So that in the left, in the left loop, the net voltage drop up to here, I mean for the first one is 10 I2. Then see, there is one more resistor here, 20, and how much is passing through this? It is I1. Right? Then that's how you see in the left loop, you can see plus 20 I2 is equals to, see how much of electromotive force is there here in the left loop? It is 80 volts. So this must be equals to 80. Right? So in the left loop, this is one equation you will get. And from the right loop, look at from this. In the left loop, again, you see I2 is passing through this 10. So you will get again 10 I2. Then see here is, you can see there are two different resistors here and I3 is passing through both, right? I3 is passing through this resistor as well as even this also. So if you just add these two, you see the total resistance here is 25 and the current passing through these two is I3. So just if you combine them, you can just take it as 25 I3 is equals to, see what is the electromotive force here? It is 90. So that you will get this equation. Now see somehow what you understand here. Anyway, these two equations are same, right? So this is one equation and these two are the other two equations. So totally there are three unknowns. There are three unknowns in the network I1, I2, I3 and you got three equations, right? If I just write them again here, you see I1 minus I2 plus I3 is equals to 0, right? I1 plus I1 minus I2 plus I3 is equal to 0 is one equation. And the other equations, you see, you got them like this. Something I went wrong. This is 20 I1. Let's see, 10 I2 plus 20 I1 is equals to 80. And the third equation you got is 10 I2 plus 25 I3 is equals to 90. Now like this, see, you got a system of three equations in three unknowns, right? You know already how to solve some kind of system of equations. But see, I'm just trying to give you few physical situations from which you will get what you call system of equations. Once after you got system of equations, we have different methods to solve them. I'm not actually getting into how to solve this system of equations, right? You know already certain methods and we are now again going to study some more. But I'm just trying to give you different situations from which you will get, these kind of equations, right? I've just used, you see what I've done? I've just used two different Kirchhoff's laws here, Kirchhoff's current law and Kirchhoff's voltage law, right? Kirchhoff's current law says at any particular point in the circuit, the sum of currents moving towards that particular point is equals to the sum of currents moving out of that, right? Sum of currents moving towards that is equal to sum of currents moving out of that. So I've just considered two different nodes here, P and Q. At P and Q, I've just calculated, currents moving towards that and current moving out of them. I've just equated them here. You see, at P, I2 is moving away from that. See, that's why I took I2 on the right hand side. And there are other two currents like I1 and I3, both are moving towards P. So that the net current moving towards this is I1 plus I3. And the current moving out of P is I2. So I've just equated them just by using Kirchhoff's current law. And the same thing I have done even for Q also. The net current moving in is equal to the net current moving out of that. Right? That's how I got one equation. In fact, these two are same here. Now, when I use Kirchhoff's voltage law in two different loops here, we have two loops here. We are calling this as the left loop and the other one as the right loop. This is the left loop and this is the right loop. In the left loop, you can see there are two resistors. right? One is of 20 ohms and the other one is of 10 ohms. And see, if you just calculate the net voltage drop within this left loop, it is, you see, 10I2 and 20I1, right? So that's how you see in the left loop, you got it like this: 10I2 plus 20I1 is equal to the electromotive force in this left loop, which is equals to 80. And see, in the right loop, see, you have actually three different resistors, right? Now see, in the resistor of resistance 10 ohm, you can see I2 is passing through this, so that the net voltage drop across this resistor is exactly equal to 10I2. And across these two resistors, you can find only one current. This current is passing through these two resistors, so that the net voltage drop across these two resistors together will be 10 plus 20, 10 plus 15, 25 multiplied by this I3. And in this right loop, the electromotive force is exactly equal to 90. That's how you got these two equations, right? And somehow you got equations here, and the rest of thing is how to solve them, right? How to solve them is a different issue. I'm not getting into those details now. Okay, I'm just trying to give you what kind of equations you are going to get from physical situations, right? So this is one application you can see from electrical engineering. Now let me just get into one more. Probably I cannot say one particular engineering domain need this application, but it has multiple domains. Like you see, roads built by civil engineers. We are going to take traffic flow, cars, mesh, different kinds of vehicles. They're built by whom you call mechanical engineers. And see, at the end, we are going to give a solution for this problem, right? So computer science engineers need to write a program to regulate all this traffic, right? And we need to incorporate certain signal lights, right? So that's the duty of electrical engineers. Combination of different streams are needed here. Okay, now let us just consider this particular traffic flow problem. Just a second. Yeah. So here you can observe one diagram that shows a small network of streets, right? You can find different streets here. And for simplicity, because see, I cannot take a too complex problem to explain you here. So for simplicity, I'm just considering all these streets are one-way streets. Okay, so in only one direction, the vehicles can pass through this. Then the direction of the traffic on each of these streets are indicated by these arrows. You can observe arrows are moving in different directions. So these arrows represent the direction in which vehicles can pass through these streets. Then see, now for my convenience, I'm just trying to name. You can observe there are 4 junctions. You can observe there are 4 junctions in this network. You see, this is the first network, and here is one more, right? So like this, we have 4 different junctions within this network. I'm just trying to give them some names to these, 4 junctions. Right? See, I'm taking this as junction A. See, this is junction B. Then see, I'm taking this as junction C, and this is junction D. I'm just trying to give them some names. Now see what I'm trying to consider here. Through these streets, I'm just assuming on average some 80 cars per hour are moving on this street, which leads to junction A. Understand? On average, 80 cars are traveling on this particular street, which leads to junction A. Then I'm considering about 120 cars per hour are traveling on these streets, which are exiting from junction B. Right? Understand? 120 cars are moving away from this junction B, on this street. Next, see, I'm just assuming there are about 70 cars which are traveling from junction C to junction D, and about 45 cars are traveling between junction D and junction B. Now, with this partial information, right? We have only this much of data with us. Now, with this partial information, can we find out the flow rate of cars on each segment of these streets, right? We have different segments in this street, in this network. Can we find out what are the flow rates? See, now for my convenience, I'm just assuming X1, right? I'm just taking it like this. See, this is, let us say, X1. X1 is the amount of cars which are traveling between A and B. Then let me take this as some X2. X2 is the amount of cars which are traveling, between A and C. Let us say if I take this is X3. X3 is the amount of cars which are traveling between C and B, right? Next, if I take this as some X4. X4 is the amount of cars which are moving towards junction C. And if I take this as some X5, X5 is the amount of cars which are traveling, which are exiting from junction D, right? So this is how you can just, consider the things. And the question is to find out flow rate in each of these segments. I mean, the question is to find out these 5 unknowns, X1 to X5, right? Now we have a very partial information with us, and still we are trying to find out, the flow rate on each of these streets individually. There are few observations actually. Whenever you take any kind of network, flow network, there are few observations. See, the first observation is always in any network of this kind, the amount of cars, amount of vehicles entering into the network is always equal to the amount of vehicles exiting the network, right? Understand? The first observation is the total amount of vehicles entering into the network together. The total amount of vehicles entering into the network is exactly equal to the amount of vehicles exiting the network. Now, considering that, you see, I'm just considering the all network together. Now, within the network, see how many of the vehicles are entering into the network. See what are the entry positions to this network. You see, vehicles may enter from this one, or they may enter from this, right? No other place, right? And these two are the locations from where vehicles exit this network. Now see, the amount of vehicles entering into network is, you see, from here it is 80, right? See, entry or 80, and from here you see there are X4 number of vehicles, as we assumed. X4 number of vehicles are entering into this network. And see, as I told you now, this amount is equals to the amount of vehicles exiting from the network. See how many are exiting from this. 120 vehicles are exiting, and from here you see, as we assumed, X5 number of vehicles are exiting this. And now from here, so this represent exiting the vehicles. Now see, if you just simplify this, what happens? You see, X4 minus X5 is equals to 120 minus 80, right? It is 40, right? So now overall in the network, you got this equation. Now see, there are 4 junctions in the network. At each of the junctions, you see, even if you consider this, at each of the junctions, the amount of the vehicles coming towards the junction is equal to the amount of vehicles leaving the junction. Consider there are no accidents in the junction. Okay, we should ignore that, right? Normally, we will incorporate different signals in the junction. So mostly there won't be any kind of accidents in the junction, and every vehicle which enters the junction will leave the junction for sure. So at every junction, if you take it particularly at junction A, if you just count the number of vehicles which are entering to junction A, it is equals to 80 from here. And any other, you see, there are no vehicles coming towards A here, and there are few vehicles moving away from A. See, this is equals to, see, the number of vehicles moving away from A is X1, and from here you see this side it is X2. So this is one equation you can observe from junction A. And if you take it from junction B, see, towards junction B, you see there are 3 different ways. Vehicles are traveling to junction B in 3 different directions. So from here you see one is X1 from this direction, and from this direction you see it is X3, and see from this direction it is 45. And this is equals to, see how many vehicles are exiting from B. You see only in this direction, it is exactly 120. So that you can write this as x1 plus x3 is equals to 120 minus 45. It is 75, right? So you got one equation from this and one more equation from here, and you got the third equation here. Now see, if you similarly take it at node, the junction C, see the amount of vehicles entering, moving towards C is exactly equal to x2 plus x4. And see the amount of vehicles moving away from this, it is x3 plus 70. Right? You can simplify this, from which you will get one more equation. Now see, if you take similarly at junction D, now see at junction D, see amount of vehicles coming towards D is actually 70, right? See in this direction. Now see from D, the amount of vehicles exiting is equals to 45 plus this x5 also. So this is equals to 45 plus x4, right? See, you got all the required equations. See in the network, in the diagram, you can observe there are exactly 5 different unknowns, x1 to x5. So to solve those 5 equations, to find out those 5 unknowns, we need to have 5 different equations, right? And you got those 5 equations here, right? When you have 5 different unknowns, you definitely need 5 equations, and you got them here. Now, when you solve these system of 5 equations, you are going to get the flow rate within the circuit. Right? So again, as I told you, I'm not going to solve those equations, but I'm just trying to give you one simple situation from which what computer science engineers can do here. They can write a program to solve this system of equations. Point number 1. They can write a program to, once they understand in which street there is more traffic. When there is more traffic in a particular street, they need to write a program to incorporate different, what you call signs, or nowadays you can observe even what you call time, what you call timers within the signals. In one particular location, the time limit is only for 10 or 15 seconds. But when there is more traffic, they'll give more time of more duration, right? Waiting times, I mean to say. So you need to write, computer science students have to write some programs to count the number of vehicles moving towards a particular junction, and thereby they can regulate this particular traffic, right? So anyway, we'll come to understand all these things when you are given a very complex network like this, right? So let me just move on to the next one, Newton's law of cooling. Probably you have studied this particular concept even in intermediates, right? What do you mean by Newton's law of cooling? Normally, when you keep any body of certain temperature in room temperature, right? If you keep a cup of, a hot cup of very hot coffee in some room temperature, what happens after a certain time? The temperature goes down. Exactly, that's what modeled here in terms of Newton's law of cooling. It says, as you can see here, the rate of cooling of a body is proportional to the temperature difference between the body and its surrounding environment, right? So let us just assume T is the temperature of this particular body, which you are keeping in the room temperature, and understand if T0 is the medium temperature. Medium in the sense you can keep that body either in room or in what you call water. You can keep it in vacuum, or if you keep it in any certain temperature, some room temperature or something, wherever you keep that, right? Wherever you keep, you are calling that as a medium, and T0 is the temperature of that particular medium. Now see, whenever you are keeping that particular body of temperature T in a room of temperature T0, then Newton's law of cooling says rate of cooling of the body, right? Rate of cooling in the sense whether it is cooling or heating up, whatever happens, there will be a change in the temperature. That rate of change of temperature will be denoted by d capital T by small t, right? Always rate of change will be represented by a derivative, as you know, right? So when I write d capital T by dt, this represents, as you know, capital T represents temperature. So this derivative represents rate of change of temperature with respect to time, right? So now what he says here, this rate is proportional to the temperature difference between the body and that of the surrounding medium, right? So it says dt by dt is proportional to T minus T naught. But see, when we replace this proportion here, because the rate is getting decreased, the temperature is getting decreased, you see, we are replacing it by a negative proportionality constant here, right? As the temperature goes down, I mean, when time increases, the temperature comes down. That's how there is an inverse proportion there. That's why we took a negative proportionality constant here. All right. Then see, when you model this, you know, the idea is temperature goes down normally, and when you model that particular situation, you got actually a differential equation here, right? I hope you know this. This we call this as actually a differential equation. Now see, when you are given this differential equation, you can actually solve this using variable separable method, which I have already discussed in intermediate. So to solve any differential equation of this kind, it is a first order differential equation. To solve this using variable separable method, you will just bring variables of one kind towards, you know, one side. You will bring all temperature variables towards the left side, and you can send these time variables to the other side, and then you can just integrate this on both sides, right? So if you just solve this, it leads to this kind of solution, right? Since you have already done all these things, I'm not spending much time on this, but see, you will get a solution of this kind. Now see, from this solution, what is the question? We understood when time passes, there is a decrease in temperature. But see, can we find out particularly at a particular instant of time, what will be the temperature? You are keeping certain body of certain temperature in some room temperature. As we know, the temperature goes down slowly. But at any particular instant of time, can we find out the temperature of that particular body? Yes, you can. See, using this particular solution, you can find out the temperature. Let me just look at one simple example here. See, this is how you can expect a question. Right? Look at this particular question. A pot of boiling water 100 degrees centigrade is removed from the fire and allowed to cool at 30 degrees room temperature. Right? You can understand very clearly all these sentences. You have a pot whose temperature is, which has a boiling water, whose temperature is at about 100 degrees centigrade. Now you kept that in, you are allowing to cool that, and you kept it in a room. You kept it in a room of temperature 30 degrees centigrade. Now see, you have observed after 2 minutes, the temperature of the water in the pot is now 90 degrees. As you know, the temperature cools down. Now it is at 90 degrees centigrade from 100 degrees temperature. Right? Now with this information, can we find out what will be the temperature of the water after 5 minutes? Right? So we can actually, right? I'm not going into the details of how to solve this, but we can, right? So this kind of physical situation will get when we really understand Newton's law of cooling, right? As I told you yesterday, you can even look at this, right? As I mentioned yesterday, if you find a murder victim, think like a lieutenant from forensic science laboratory, right? If you are a lieutenant from forensic science laboratory, and if you find some murder victim in a particular room or in some particular location, the question is, being a lieutenant, can we estimate the time of death, right? Can we really understand at what time the death was happened, or else how long ago it was happened? Can we find out that? Yes, it is, right? See, you can observe there are few information in this question, right? See, they found the body in a particular room the room is at a constant temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And when the lieutenant arrived at 9:40 p.m. in the night, he observed the temperature of body as some 94.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And see, he has taken so many other clues, and after a certain time, around at 11 o'clock, he again calculated the temperature of the body, and he found it as some 89.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? Now see, with this information, look at it. this is the equation which I told you just before. T is equals to T naught plus C into e to the power of minus KT. Now see, this is the solution to find out the temperature of body at any time, right? Using this equation, in fact, you can find out the time, right? You can find out the time of death, right? Normally, see what happens. There will be certain normal temperature to our human body. If you remember, if I am really correct, it will be around 98.6 or so. Normal body temperature, right? Now see, the room temperature is at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit. When this particular human being lost his life, slowly the temperature of the body cools down and it goes up to the 68 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Now see, within this time only he arrived this particular situation. He arrived to the room. When he observed the body at 9:40 p.m., he found the temperature of the body is 94.4 degrees centigrade. I mean 94.4 degree Fahrenheit. And after after some 1 hour 20 minutes or so, he observed it is not yet still reached to the room temperature. I mean, it is not still reached to the room temperature here, right? So keeping this information in mind, we can really observe at what time it reaches this room temperature. After observing this, you can really easily expect how long ago it was, this murder was happened, right? If you really observe at what time this was happened, you can even understand at what time this murder was really happened. Remember, being a mathematician, I cannot really identify who has done it, right? But I can only identify at what time this murder was happened. Okay, so we can use Newton's law of cooling to solve this particular problem, right? So we are going to study this also after a few days, right? We have this particular concept even in our syllabus. Okay, so when we discuss really this topic, you can enjoy it. Now let me just move on to one more application, simple harmonic motion, right? You're all familiar with simple harmonic motion. Perhaps you have even done this kind of experiment, especially, you have taken one pendulum experiment, right? You have even found what you call displacement of the ball after a certain time. But anyway, I'm taking the other way, simple harmonic motion. You see what you can observe here. There is one fixed end here. There is one fixed end here to which a spring is attached, right? To this fixed end, one spring is attached, and understand the spring, the stiffness of this spring is actually identified by the spring constant. It is K, right? Then see, to the other end of this spring, you can observe a particular weight. Let us say this is, a weight of mass M is attached, right? So one end of the spring is fixed to this end, and the other end, at the other end of this spring, you can observe a particular weight of mass M. Now see what happens when you immediately hang a weight to that particular spring. The spring tries to oscillate up and down, isn't it? The spring tries to oscillate up and down. Now when it is oscillating, can we find out the displacement of this particular weight at any particular instant of time, right? At a particular instant of time, can we find out the displacement of the string, displacement of the particular weight, right? So here we use simply one particular what you call principle from physics again, Newton's second law of motion, right? What it says, F is equals to M into A. The force acting on a particular weight is equals to mass multiplied by its acceleration, right? So this is what we use. And particularly when you take this particular system, there are two kinds of forces acting on this, right? If you take any particular location, if you take this particular location here, if you observe here, at a particular instant of time, if the body is at this particular location, let us say, right? So when the body is below the equilibrium position, there will be an elongation of some, let us say, x units. In fact, you are about to find out that displacement only, right? Understand, at any instant of time t, let us just assume x is the displacement in the spring, right? At any particular instant of time, understand, x is the displacement. Then see, we are trying to find out this particular displacement here. Now see, I'm just trying to use, as I told, we are using Newton's second law of motion to find out this particular displacement. Now let us see, at any particular time, it is at a position of x units from the equilibrium position. And now at that position, let me calculate what are the forces acting on the weight, right? See, it is oscillating somewhere, and now at any particular time t, let us say it is at any particular position x units. Now at this unit, at this particular position, there are two forces acting on this. One force towards down and one force, restoring force due to the what you call this spring. Now see, one force acting on the spring from downwards will be something like this: m into d square x by dt square. Right? What is this d square x by dt square? You see, we need acceleration, right? How can you calculate acceleration? As we know, if we take x as the displacement, the rate of change of displacement is actually velocity, right? Dx by dt, will write it, and this actually represents velocity. Then when you calculate the rate of change of velocity, right, dv by dt, or even you can write it as d square x by dt square, rate of change, differentiation of dx by dt, right? See, this d square x by dt square represents acceleration acting, acceleration of that particular weight at instant time t, right? Now this is the force acting on that downwards. And the other way, there is a force, there is a restoring force due to the spring, and that restoring force is exactly equals to minus k into x. You'll get this from Hooke's law, right? Always, it states actually force needed to extend or compress a spring in some distance x is exactly equal to kx. But see, the restoring force, what we consider is, it is against to the gravitation there, right? That's why I took this as minus kx here. Now see, what you can understand from this, again you got a differential equation. See, perhaps it is popular like this: d square x by dt square is equals to minus k by m into x. And sometimes even they'll write it like this: just by bringing k by m to the other side, you can write it like this: d square x by dt square plus k by m into x is equals to 0. Right? The most popular equation corresponding to simple harmonic motion is this: d square x by dt square plus, you'll write something like this: omega square x is equals to 0. Right? Probably you remember simple harmonic motion by this expression. Now see, you can calculate the displacement in the spring at any particular instant of time when we solve this differential equation. If you solve this differential equation, you are going to get the displacement at any particular time t. Right? So how to solve this differential equation is again a different issue. We are going to discuss that very soon. Right? So there are a few other situations. LCR circuit, we have already reached our time, but anyway, I'll just try to give you one situation. See, if you take one LCR circuit of this kind, you can just find out the net voltage drop across these three components in the circuit. You can find one resistor here. You can find what you call a capacitor and a resistor as well. Now, across each of these three components, there is some kind of voltage drop when current is passing through the circuit. And remember, it's a closed circuit. Within the closed circuit, when there is a passage of current, there is certainly some, voltage drop. Now, if you consider the voltage drop across each of these components, across right. So if you take an inductor of inductance L, across this inductor, the net voltage drop will be exactly equals to L into d square q by dt square. Right? What is this q here? Q is the charge in the circuit. And I hope you remember this rate of change of charge is exactly, this is what actually current. Right? So the net voltage drop across this particular inductor is exactly equals to L into dq by dt square. And L is the inductance, in this inductor. And now if you take R as the resistance across this resistor, now see, when current passes through this, the net voltage drop across this resistor is again equals to I into R. Then see, if you take a capacitor of capacitance C, the voltage drop, even this is popularly known as R into dq by dt. When you are writing everything in terms of charge, let me also write this in in terms of charge. R into dq by dt is the voltage drop across this resistor. Then if you take a capacitor of capacitance C, then the net, the voltage drop across this capacitor is exactly equals to Q by C. Right? Now, if you again recall Kirchhoff's voltage law, it says when there is no electric source here, you see, there is no electromotive force. That's how the net voltage drop across these three components will be equals to 0. That's how you see, if you just add the voltage drops across these three components, L into d square Q by dt square plus R into dq by dt plus Q by C. You know, this is the net voltage drop, sum of all the three voltage drops. Now see this this voltage drop, you know, sum of voltage drops is equals to 0. You know how you got this? This is from Kirchhoff's voltage law. Now see, again, this is a second order differential equation, right? So these are different physical situations. When you mathematically model them, they lead to different mathematical concepts. You know, right? We have seen two different concepts today. One is algebraic equations and the second one is differential equations. Now see, in semester 1, we are going to particularly concentrate on calculus and differential equations, right? Calculus is all about review of differentiation and integration, and at the end we are even going to discuss differential equations, right? We'll discuss both first order differential equations and second order differential equations as well. While discussing them, we'll again discuss these applications. Okay, so just I thought of giving you some glimpse of what kind of applications we'll get from physical situations, right? So that's all for today.